Right.
And then we also, Adam Duxter spoke with witnesses who saw someone performing CPR before that person was taken off. That is when a large group of protesters then grew at the scene,
right.
And that's when we saw more law enforcement actually trying to make sure that peace was maintained.
And we know because of the large presence of protesters on the scene, there's going to be video, there's going to be social media posts out there, all of this to provide context to exactly what happened. Now, Adam Duxter and Connor both did say, you know, a lot of the video that you may be seeing in the next hour or days are going to be from the aftermath. Reactionary video to that deadly shooting by an ICE officer toward a demonstrator who has died because of that gunshot.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's the footage they want to see before that that can really help tell the story as far as what happened to that person in the car.
Right.
Because all the footage we've seen right now, this is reactionary to that incident. Again, this taking place in South Minneapolis, 34th and Portland, just north of that area, a very, very busy intersection as it is.
And as you can see from this aerial shot, it is completely blocked off and has been since about 9:30 this morning. Again, in the next minute, we are going to start our news at noon. We're also hoping to be hearing directly from city leaders as well as the police chief and the mayor of Minneapolis.
And not only that, but we've seen city council members, as we alluded to before, trying to calm the situation. We know that Police Chief Brian O'Hara is trying to calm the situation. This is something that he worried about before, as he mentioned, that violence would be increasing with this swelling of officers who are there right now. Just again, trying to make sure that everyone stays calm.
Because the emotion is high.
Yeah.
People are scared of losing loved ones and of officers coming into their own neighborhoods and taking their neighbors away, which is evident in the large amount of people that came out to this protest here at 34th and Portland. Our news at noon starts now. We'll have more coverage of this breaking news.
Okay, so our thanks to our partners at WCCO there in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at what is, to say the very least, a chaotic scene. Once again, it is confirmed an ICE officer now is thought to have fatally shot a woman in South Minneapolis. So a lot to break apart here. Let's go live to CBS News correspondent Chanel Calls. She's been watching this story just like I have been watching this. Do we know anything about the person shot or the circumstance that led up to that, now that we know confirmed fatal shooting, Chanel?
Yeah, so let's start with the latest on what's confirmed to us. DHS, as you mentioned, Reed, is now confirming that a person was shot and killed by ICE agents today. In that same social media post, Reed, DHS also saying that ICE officers were injured and they're expected to make full recoveries. To your question about who this person was, still unclear at this point, but we know this happened in South Minneapolis at about 9:30 a.m. local time. The mayor saying this on social media. I'll just share my screen with you. It says, "I'm aware of a shooting involving an ICE agent at 34th Street in Portland. The presence of federal immigration enforcement agents is causing chaos in our city. We're demanding ICE to leave the city immediately. We stand rock solid with our immigrant and refugee communities." So here's what we understand happened and how this whole thing unfolded based on accounts from the scene, Reed. There was obviously some kind of law enforcement, ICE enforcement action that was happening in this Minneapolis neighborhood. That eventually led to a chase, and then that chase apparently is what led to this shooting. Now, a local city council member that our local CBS News affiliate had interviewed on the scene had said that they saw an ICE agent shoot at a woman resident who lived in that neighborhood. Witnesses also telling CBS News that they actually saw the chaos that unfolded in the moments after. They saw that a woman was carried out on a stretcher after people reported gunshots rang out there. Actually, a CBS News photojournalist who was on the scene said they even saw paramedics performing CPR on someone. And while this was all unfolding, you can imagine what a chaotic scene this was. So people began leaving their homes, they were outside, they began gathering, and that, Reed, eventually sort of turned into this large protest. We understand that a number of those protesters also then began throwing snowballs at federal ICE agents' vehicles that were there on the scene, and that eventually then led to clashes between protesters and police, Reed. As you've now heard as well, authorities then used tear gas or those chemical irritants to sort of get those protesters to stop and to disperse. And then about an hour after all of that had happened, Assistant Secretary Deputy of Homeland Security had sent out a social media post, which I want to share with you here. So Tricia McLaughlin sending out this very long post on social media, again, confirming here that the alleged perpetrator, she says, was hit and is deceased. The ICE officers who were hurt, she says, are expected to make full recoveries. And when I go up here, this is DHS's account of what they say happened. They say that ICE officers in Minneapolis were conducting targeted operations when riders began blocking ICE officers, and one of those violent riders, they say, weaponized her vehicle, attempting to run over law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them. They are calling this an act of domestic terrorism. Obviously, this is their account. We'll have to really study and do more journalism to figure out whether this is, in fact, how this unfolded, because we did get various different accounts from people who were on the scene. Reed?
All right, Chanel, and also we have an opportunity right now to hear from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem talking about this scene. Here she is.
Commander over Task Force Guardian oversees almost 3,000 soldiers that are deployed to the border from Del Rio to Brownsville, Texas, right here. With him is Captain Muse, who is also serves alongside the Coast Guard, and we're grateful for their service and their operation down here at the border. As you know.
Okay, so we were told that Kristi Noem would be addressing this situation right now. We do anticipate that she will have something to say. We'll be monitoring that while she speaks to people down at the border town in Texas. But for now, let's jump the map back to Minnesota, where it looks like some of those protesters are quickly dispersing from that neighborhood where violence played out. Once again, our reporters and our CBS News sources in Minnesota say an ICE officer shot and killed a woman in South Minneapolis during an ICE operation. Let's listen in to that coverage.
I did ask neighbors, I said, what do you think led up to this? And again, they said there was some sort of federal enforcement going on Portland and 34th, or at least in the area here in South Minneapolis prior to this. And again, that Honda Pilot with multiple people inside was, we're told, in the way of multiple federal agents. And again, a federal agent, we're told, got out of their vehicle, attempted to open the door of that Honda Pilot while people were inside. The pilot, we're told, reversed and then drove away. And again, that's when those shots rang out. And one thing I do also want to emphasize, Heather, is that we are told, and I have personally seen, there is cell phone video of that shooting, and you can physically see and hear the moment when the shots ring out. We're told community advocates in the area have a copy of that video right now. Again, working to piece things along. We're hoping to get more information as the day goes on, but just an overall very chaotic scene over the course of the last 2 hours here in South Minneapolis.
Right. Adam, it's very interesting that you are giving that witness account of what happened. It'll also be interesting for people investigators, when they look at this video, because we're getting a slightly different story from what ICE is telling us. According to ICE, that this was one of the people there was blocking ICE officers and then weaponized her vehicle. This is their words from ICE, attempting to run over the law enforcement officer in an attempt to kill them. So that video should shed some light on what actually happened. But as you can imagine, it was probably quite chaotic at the scene. I do have a question for you, though. The video that we saw earlier was of people who were in camouflage. They had
You're watching continuing coverage on CBS News 24/7. ICE confirms an officer fatally shot a woman in South Minneapolis. Of course, we know this comes at a time when DHS Secretary Kristi Noem had that exclusive interview with our CBS News correspondent Nicole Skanga, talking about adding more boots on the ground, intensifying those operations there in Minnesota. So let's go live to the scene. Nicole Skanga, one thing that was just revealed from our partners at WCCO is there is actual video of that moment that ICE officer pulled the trigger on one of those protesters. That will certainly say a lot, Nicole.
Absolutely. That video is going to be key to verifying whether what the Department of Homeland Security is saying right now, which is their officers were targeted by a vehicle that was attempting to ram federal law enforcement, and that an officer, an ICE official, opened fire, what they're calling defensively. This video is going to be key to shedding light on exactly what happened. What I can tell you is what we're witnessing right now on the scene. We arrived in the chaotic aftermath when all of this played out. You can see protests behind me. They have settled a little bit. Earlier today, we saw hundreds of protesters and we saw ICE officials deploying tear gas, with one witness telling us they saw ICE law enforcement throwing at least 4 to 6 canisters of tear gas. You could see protesters that were actively choking amid some of these chemical hazards. Now, over my left shoulder is where beyond this van, the car crash happened, and just moments ago we saw that car being towed out by law enforcement. But witnesses that we're talking to at the scene who ran out, who heard gunfire, told us that what they saw was an active ICE law enforcement operation with ICE that were in this residential neighborhood. They heard at least one shot fired, though we are now learning from the Department of Homeland Security that there were multiple shots and that there was one individual lying on the ground. I spoke with one witness, his name Danny L., who told me he watched as that individual, who bleeding out, body limp, was carried by law enforcement out of the street. We now know that individual is deceased. And again, the Department of Homeland Security saying that their officer opened fire in a defensive way. You mentioned this earlier, Reed, but I cannot emphasize enough to viewers just how tremendous the law enforcement deployment in Minneapolis has been over the past few days. There are more than 2,100 federal agents from the Department of Homeland Security here in Minneapolis, in the city of 430,000. That is more federal agents than were deployed to New York City, to Los Angeles, and to Chicago. So this is a very tense area. We were with ICE law enforcement embedded just yesterday as they were carrying out enforcement raids, and you could feel the tension between residents here in the Minneapolis area and federal law enforcement. You could hear protesters whistling. You could see shouting. It is a very, very tense scene right now.
It's quite literally a flashpoint, and really history being written in real time as it speaks to this immigration issue and the crackdown in the United States, especially in Minnesota. We want to let our viewers know, Nicole, as we hang on there with you, that we are expecting words from the mayor there of Minneapolis any moment now. We're also waiting to hear from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. She's down in Texas at border towns. You talked to her exclusively yesterday. Do you feel that protesters now are starting to just listen to what they're being told by law enforcement there on the scene? We had some reporting by one of the WCCO reporters there saying that they were being told by their organizers to go where there was reported ICE activity a few streets over. Are they now doing that? I can hear somebody yelling, "Start marching."
Yeah, we can hear some of the shouts by protesters. And by the way, everything right now is very peaceful. Would just like to reinforce that fact. We're seeing a lot of neighbors come out to sort of see what's happening. A lot of people who are curious taking cell phone video. We've seen some individuals who are part of advocacy groups, the ACLU, who are interviewing folks on the street. We've also seen a lot of angry residents here in Minneapolis, and we have heard about individuals who are now moving on to go perhaps pursue ICE law enforcement wherever they are next. But that has been a common thread here. One of the things that I want to point out to you is that this is not the first ramming incident or alleged car ramming incident that led to an officer opening fire that we have witnessed over the past few months. Just a few months ago in Chicago, there was a similar incident during an ICE law enforcement raid. It started as a car ramming incident between two drivers and a series of ICE law enforcement vehicles. ICE alleged at the time that those drivers were intimidating agents. One of the ICE officers then got out of the car and allegedly shot that driver several times. that resulted in her being hospitalized, and there was an impending lawsuit. Now, in this case, here in Minneapolis, we know a similar incident played out, but that victim right now, that individual who had been shot, is now dead, according to the Department of Homeland Security. And again, amid the immigration crackdown that this Trump administration has led, there continues to be a lot of tension in cities across the country. But given just how heightened the law enforcement presence is now in Minneapolis, talking to former ICE officials, they told me they felt like this was not a if, but a when moment, that there would be this sort of confrontation.
Nobody was threatened.
So they actually said that this was one thing that they anticipated, Nicole. And Nicole is moving a little bit here. I just want to give her a little bit of a moment to reset here. It sounds like things are escalating out there. So for Nicole and her crew's safety, you can see she stepped out for a minute. But as we look at this live picture, and just in case you're just now logging on or tuning in, let's do a little bit of a reset. You can hear Nicole there sort of moving around there in Minneapolis. ICE has confirmed that one of their officers fatally shot a woman. This was during protester response to some ICE operations in a residential neighborhood in that area. The Department of Homeland Security, ICE, the feds say that this was in response to the weaponization of a vehicle that was used against one of their officers, and that one of those officers, fearing for his or her life, chose to fire a shot. And in fact, one of the tweets that went out, or one of the posts on X, I should say, that went out, you said shots in the plural. Now you can see all of the police tape there. This is going to now be an investigative scene. Not only local police very curious about what happened, wanting to dot every I, cross every T, but also now this will be a federal investigation. So part of the power of this broadcast, CBS News 24/7, is leaning on our reporters, both network and local, who are at the scene. Let's go and listen in to one of those reporters from a different vantage point from Nicole.
They are coming. If you thought that maybe something like this would not happen, it happened. If you thought for some reason maybe there's something good about this, but you realize the worst thing we just saw, an evil version of it. So I want to just thank everybody for coming out. I know we are in deep pain and frustration today, and I'm sad to say there's a family among us tonight that will not have a loved one with them. But they will have the love from all of us with them. And for the first time, they will see the goodness of all of us, and we will stand up for her. We will stand up for all of our neighbors. And in this moment, we must fight for all of us. And I'm demanding the governor, I'm demanding the BCA, and all other law enforcement agencies, the county prosecutors and others, to look at this incident and to properly bring charges where warranted. Now I'd like to turn over to MIRAC. They have been also on the ground. In fact, MIRAC actually has received a lot of the eyewitness information, and so we will be sharing that hopefully with those agencies.
All right, as you just heard from here, this is Jaylani Husseini, is the head of CARE Minnesota. Let's get over to Frankie McLister. He's in a different part of South Minneapolis right now, where there's more reported ICE activity. Frankie, what are you seeing?
Yeah, Maria, so I want to paint a picture of where we are. So we have the 35W, right? We're on the west side of it. Individuals here told us that they heard agents were going to come towards this area. We're on Lake Street in Nicollet, and what happened right after we got here, agents were here. These trucks over here, as our photojournalist Will Griner is showing you, are the last of those agents that came over here. I want to tell you, when they got here, people started blowing their whistles. More from surrounding areas started coming over here. Let's take it to one of these individuals over here. Will, I want you to watch your step right here. Let's speak with an eyewitness here. Is anybody able to tell us exactly what you saw? Ma'am, what about you? Let's keep on walking over here. We have a few individuals here. Anybody able to portray what you saw, what you heard of, ma'am?
I actually just live in the neighborhood. I was notified that something was going on. This is where I live. I care. So I just came up to show support.
I see you getting emotional. For those that aren't here.
I'm sorry, baby, but like, this is bad. This is really bad. Like, these are people's lives. They're not hurting anyone. Like, for what? This is based on hate, right? Like, it's all based on hate. And we're here to show love and support and protect our community members.
Thank you for your time. Take care of yourself, okay? What we do know is on Monday, CBS News was able to confirm that the Department of Homeland Security, as we've reported, said that 2,000 agents, federal agents, were going to come to the Twin Cities, which is what they say, their largest group of agents to come upon a city in the United States with their operation. As we're seeing, we heard earlier, the individual that was at the scene east of 35W on Portland has now died. But right here, we saw that isn't stopping the agents. They are continuing to go across the area. And Maria, I'm going to send it back to you as we learn more about what's going on throughout the day.
Right, Frankie, this is Heather. I'll take it here from you. I do have a quick question, though. Do you see agents, ICE agents, where you are from right there? Because all I see are people that are standing by.
Yeah, so when you first got us on camera right here, that was the agents leaving. So we saw probably, I would like to say, about 10 to 15 of them. They came right behind us. If you're familiar with the area, Will, I'm going to step out of the frame so you can kind of give the viewers a better picture. But that right there, as you can see, the stoplight right there, that is Lake Street, obviously a main thoroughfare in Minneapolis right here behind those city skyscrapers. But it's a warmer day out, as we know. A lot of people out here, as you can see. But I do want to say, Heather, more and more people came out of stores, out of apartments right off the bat as whistles started blowing. And those vehicles, they come up and they get out and they do what they want to do.
All right. Well, Frankie McLister reporting for us out there on Lake Street this morning. And Barrett, you have to assume that the ICE officers and Department of Homeland Security are going to continue their activities here. I mean, 2,000 officers, the largest in anywhere across the country.
All a part of Operation Metro Surge, month-long operation here, and we've really seen raids play out, heightened this week, multiple. This right now is an aerial view of that scene back on 34th and Portland. Those 3 vehicles there involved in that crash.
Right, just to give you a recap right now of what we understand from the Department of Homeland Security is that one person was shot by an ICE agent. A woman was shot by an ICE agent, shot and killed. This happened about 9:30 this morning here. Varying accounts of what people saw at the moment, but we do understand that there is video of that shooting there from this morning. Now, ICE telling us that this was a person who had been, let's see what they say, had weaponized her vehicle, attempting to run over law enforcement. But people there on the ground giving their own accounts, saying, no, rather that car was backing up and moving away, that the ICE officer had come to the car, opened the car door, they had reversed and then gone forward. So again, video of this. I'm certain that investigators will be looking at all of that, listening to what the witnesses had to say and taking into account the ICE account of what is happening here. But
yeah, and multiple angles of videos too on the ground will all, put together this puzzle piece. Let's check back in with our Connor White, who is still over at the scene on 34th and Portland. And Connor, what is the vibe there now? Or is there still a decent crowd? It looks like there still is.
There still is. We've seen things ebb and flow a little bit. Some people did go to that other scene where Frankie McLister just was and talked about. There are still plenty of people here, though, at 34th and Portland. There's still a heavy Minneapolis police presence as the investigation continues where that car eventually crashed after the shooting. We now know that that woman is dead. Some of that news is starting to disperse through the crowd, and we have some community organizations who are now on scene talking about this, talking about their response. We just heard from the leaders of CARE, which is a Muslim organization and support group that has been in the news quite a bit in the past few months, really since around the Thanksgiving time, to be able to push back on the way that President Trump has disparaged and categorized the large Somali population here. Their leadership is here with other organizations to effectively push back on the way that ICE and DHS are categorizing or describing the shooting that led to that woman dying here earlier this morning. They're actually calling upon local agencies from Minneapolis police all the way up to Governor Tim Walz's office to really try to step in a bit forcefully here and actually get ICE to clear out and, to paraphrase what they're saying, leave the city alone. Now, we have heard from some of those higher-ranking officials, including Governor Walz, in the form of statements on social media. Nothing too specific just yet. He says that he's monitoring the situation, but we've also heard on social media from Mayor Jacob Frey, who is a bit more forceful. If somewhere in that paragraph that he posted, he's looking for ICE to leave the Twin Cities area immediately. We understand that officials here with the city are expected to deliver a press conference sometime soon. We saw Chief of Police Brian O'Hara here. We've heard him in recent days, as recently as just yesterday, talk about the risk that ICE poses the way that they are operating. Chants continue here. Still a lot of anger here directed at law enforcement as these investigations continue. Go arrest ICE. That's what they're yelling at the moment. Just taking a moment to make sure I can hear them correctly. It's really this push that we've heard from a lot of people that they want law enforcement to actually go after ICE when they believe that they are committing an illegal act. We'll have to see how things develop here, guys.
All right, that's Connor White there live for us at the corner of 34th and Portland, where a large crowd has shown up. We know some of that crowd actually left to go to a different spot in South Minneapolis where there was reported ICE activity, but it looks like it's more people are gathered in that area. We did learn that the woman who was killed, this according to Representative Ilhan Omar, she posted in a tweet, also Jaylani Hussein, who's the head of CARE, both saying that this woman was a legal observer. So again, still waiting to hear from the mayor and from the police chief of Minneapolis. They are expecting to have a press conference. It was supposed to start about 10 minutes ago, but as always, generally when those happen, it usually takes some time for everybody to get together. As Connor was just mentioning, we did see Police Chief Brian O'Hara there on the scene. And you and I were just talking just last night. The police chief was saying that this was something that he was concerned about, that someone was going to be hurt, that someone was going to be shot, and asked for a protocol, really, of what to do in these very volatile situations.
Right, and also calling on these demonstrators, the protesters, to remain peaceful as well. And that is a message echoed by Mayor Jacob Frey. Again, we're waiting to hear from these city leaders, the police chief, the mayor, and Mayor Jacob Frey also echoing some of the messages from protesters, asking and calling on ICE to leave the city, and also calling for demonstrations to be peaceful. We do have a statement from him saying we are demanding that ICE leave the city and state immediately. We stand by our immigrant and refugee communities. Know that you have our full support. Again, we are still waiting for city leaders to speak out publicly on this fatal incident this morning. Again, that was expected about 10 minutes ago, but we are still in that waiting game right now. Live look right here. Waiting for
the empty podium as we wait for both the Minneapolis mayor and the Minneapolis police chief to come brief us on the situation. We have gotten word via Twitter from ICE, from their official statement about what has happened. We understand there's also a vigil that is scheduled for 5 o'clock this afternoon. We don't have the details on exactly where that would be, but presumably somewhere near that location right there. 34th and Portland. Over the past hour or so, they have put up those fences in that spot. Where you saw those 3 cars that look smashed up there. We understand that the woman who was shot and killed was in a purple Honda Pilot. You can't see it from this chopper video, but as the chopper moves, you'll see it's in that area behind the police chief there. We understand Minneapolis police and the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department did respond to this scene, and the ICE agents who had been there were taken out of this scene within the first hour or so. But before that, there had been skirmishes with people. The pepper spray, the ICE agents were using pepper spray on some of the people that were out there protesting what was going on. Or Adam Duxter was right there. Actually, he and his photographer had some pepper spray that was sprayed on them as well. Now, lots of different accounts of what actually happened leading up to this shooting. We have the ICE account. We have what some of the witnesses are saying. There's also video out there of what happened. You know, with a lot of these situations and a lot of these operations, people are out there with their cell phones.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you think about all of the different angles, and each angle really is going to tell a different story and put this jigsaw puzzle together, because we are hearing, you know, different accounts from witnesses on the ground that say they saw this happen, and from ICE officials as well. So this time will tell how this all plays out. But again, the mayor, city leaders calling for peaceful demonstrations, calling for ICE to get out of the city as we continue to wait for an update from city leaders this morning.
As you mentioned, we've heard from the mayor asking for ICE to get out of the city. We've heard from Senator Tina Smith saying that same thing as well. But we've also heard from elected officials, including some of the city council members, just asking demonstrators to be peaceful in all of this. It's a bit of a challenging ask because there's so many emotions that are running high right now. Let's take it back to Adam Duxter. He's been on the ground this morning for the past several hours and has seen all of this unfold. Adam, it doesn't look like the crowd is getting any smaller.
No, in fact, I would say, Heather, that it's growing, and I apologize for the obscenities that you're hearing right now. It appears potentially there might be some more either, I don't want to speculate, but I do know that within the last hour and a half, we saw just about all the federal agents that were on scene leave the scene, some in violent clashes. Now, every law enforcement agency you'll see within the intersection here at Portland and 34th is either Hennepin County Sheriff's Office or Minneapolis Police. They've been here. They've put up barricades here within the last hour or so, in addition to this crime scene tape. We just did hear moments ago, and I know we might have had some of it broadcast over the air, but we heard from leaders with both CARE and MIRAC here in the Twin Cities, and one thing that they did say was, you know, they have that video. There is a bystander video of the moment of the shooting, and they do count on that going public. They did directly say that it contradicts the message that's being shared by the feds today. But again, there's a crowd here, I would say. There's still a lot of anger. There's a lot of anxiousness. There's a lot of fear in this crowd. We've seen maybe a half dozen to a dozen faith leaders show up. Again, we have community leaders. We've seen city council members. The police chief was here for quite some time. And then, of course, us, media and press. I will say it's a bit of a standoff at this point. There isn't much movement back and forth. But again, we heard from those community leaders within the last 10, 15 minutes here, and they confirmed that the person who was killed today is a community member, someone who was here, they say, to protest the federal enforcement that we're seeing right now in the city of Minneapolis. And of course, for context for our viewers, if you're just tuning in and wondering, you know, what led up to this over the course of this week, we do know that what is happening this week is what ICE itself is referring to as the largest federal immigration crackdown in its history. 2,000 plus agents in the city of Minneapolis and, of course, across the Twin Cities. We saw arrests yesterday in Bloomington. We saw an arrest in St. Paul, where Commissioner of DHS, Christian Noem, was boots on the ground. We did see Greg Bovino here, boots on the ground today. So these federal leaders are here. One expert told CBS there is as many Homeland Security investigators in the city of Minneapolis right now as there is the entire state of Arizona, a border state. Just to give you that context, this is a massive, large-scale federal enforcement, and it turned deadly today in a matter of minutes. Of course, the narrative that we're told at this point, if you're just tuning in, is that it was not someone necessarily who federal agents were here to arrest, but rather it was a community member attempting to stand in their way or document or be in this area while they were conducting some sort of federal enforcement. And of course, we just saw that video moments ago, and it does show that Honda Pilot attempting to leave the scene, and it corroborates what we've heard from multiple neighbors, which is a federal agent came up to the driver's side door of that Honda Pilot as it was attempting to drive away and fired exactly 3 shots through the driver's side window of that Pilot. And we're told by neighbors, folks in this area, that there were multiple people inside that Pilot. I personally have seen video today of paramedics attempting to give first aid CPR just on a snowbank to the person who was in that vehicle. We were told because of the size of this federal enforcement activity that there was maybe some difficulty getting a ambulance into the area to give that emergency medical attention to that person in the Honda Pilot. In fact, one neighbor just on the street told me that they saw eventually multiple people physically pick up that person and walk them away after those shots were fired and after CPR was administered here on the side of the road. But again, we just heard moments ago from those community leaders who paint, again, a very different picture. And of course, we don't want to speculate what happened, as we ourselves are still trying to gather information. But a very different narrative is being painted here at the intersection of Portland and 34th than the one that federal agents are painting, or rather the feds are painting. Was that this is a federal agent in fear for their lives, as someone's attempting to use a vehicle as a weapon. We're told that it was a person attempting to drive away as a federal agent was attempting to open their door when that federal agent fired exactly 3 shots into the driver's side of that car. Again, the crowd here is growing. I would say within the last couple of hours we've seen, or even the last hour, we've seen 100 to 200 more people join. At one point, I'd say within the last hour, we saw a significant number of people leave to head to what was believed to be another federal immigration enforcement at Lake and Nicollet at a Dollar Tree. We're not exactly sure. I'm personally not exactly sure how that ended up, but there is a good chance that many people are now coming back to this area. But again, the federal agents who were here have all cleared this scene, and as they did, it was intense. We saw chemical irritants deployed exactly where I'm standing right now. We saw a federal agent wrestle and push a man to the ground and then almost stand over him as the person was on their back and directly fire chemical irritants into that man's face. He was bloody, and his entire face was coated with what looked like to be pepper spray. And then we saw a moment where federal agents were attempting to take a van out of this area down 34th and down over to what I believe would be the next street over, or even down the alley here. And when that happened, multiple demonstrators or protesters attempted to block that vehicle. And that is when federal agents got out of that vehicle and, again, from point blank range, administered those chemical irritants and then put down and deployed tear gas as well. I could tell you we were caught up in that. But again, if you're just tuning in, I think this is what many people feared, as you have 2,000 additional federal agents here on the streets of Minneapolis, is that there could potentially be a deadly clash. But again, we're going to hear from the mayor who just spoke moments ago.
Right now, and we collectively are going to do everything possible to get to the bottom of this, to get justice, and to make sure that there is an investigation that is conducted in full. But what we do know is that a 37-year-old woman is dead and that she was shot by ICE. We've dreaded this moment since the early stages of this ICE presence in Minneapolis. Not only is this a concern that we've had internally, we've been talking about it. They are not here to cause safety in this city. What they are doing is not to provide safety in America. What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust. They're ripping families apart. They're sowing chaos on our streets. And in this case, quite literally killing people. So They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit. This was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying, getting killed. As soon as it happened and we learned of the incident, we had several priorities. The first, of course, was to get the victim to the hospital and to get care as soon as possible. To the family, I'm so deeply sorry. There's nothing that I can say right now that's going to make you or your relatives or the friends of the victim feel any better. There were, I believe, 2 Minneapolis police officers that responded and were in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. The second was to get ICE off of the scene. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of ICE and federal officers that were there at the time. Having them there was only causing more chaos. Having them there was only making a difficult situation even more problematic, and one that, yes, they created themselves. There's little I can say, again, that'll make this situation better, but I do have a message for our community, for our city, and I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. People are being hurt. Families are being ripped apart. Long-term Minneapolis residents that have contributed so greatly to our city, to our culture, to our economy are being terrorized, and now somebody is dead. That's on you. And it's also on you to leave. It's on you to make sure that further damage, further loss of life and injury is not done. We're going to be working towards justice as quickly as we possibly can right now, and justice is what we've all got to get. Next, a message to our community. Look, we all know that the agenda of this Trump administration is to create chaos. Let us respond right now with our best versions of self. This is a moment where all of us in Minneapolis and beyond, we can rise to the occasion. We can show them who we are. We can show them the kind of courage, bravery, love, and compassion that makes Minneapolis, Minneapolis, and that makes America, America. We are better than a bunch of ICE agents being deployed to cities around the country and ripping apart families and communities. We're better than that. And so we are going to meet that hate with love. We are going to meet that despair with hope. We are going to meet that injustice with constitutional justice ourselves. And we're going to make sure that in this very difficult moment, we do not take the bait that these ICE agents are trying to create and that the federal government, to be clear, wants. They want us to respond in a way that creates a military occupation in our city. They want an excuse to come in and show the kind of force that will create more chaos and more despair. Let's not let them. Let's rise to this occasion. Let's show them something far more beautiful than the kind of division that they're trying to stoke. Let's show them unity of purpose, of love, and the courage of our conviction. Our conviction, to be clear, is rock solid, and it is for our neighbors, all of our neighbors. It's for people who have lived here for 80 years. It is for new immigrants who have made this city a better place. That's the kind of love that we're going to show up with right now. If you're angry, I get it. I am too. if you're feeling that kind of despair, it's understandable. Let's show them who we can be. Let's show up with peace. To march, to protest, to hug one another, to love all the way with peace. Do not give them what they want. Finally, we've got a lot of work that needs to happen right now to make sure that, first, of course, the scene was secured as much as possible, that we were able to get the victim, now deceased, to the hospital. We've got a lot of work to do in the coming days. I want to thank our city enterprise for the work that they have done, but more importantly, what they're about to do, because this is going to be heavy, and our city has been through a lot. We also know that we're prepared to do right for people. Among them is our chief of police. I'll invite him up.
My name is Brian O'Hara, B-R-I-A-N-O''H-A-R-A. I am the Minneapolis Police Chief. This morning, Minneapolis police officers received a report of federal law enforcement being involved in a deadly force incident, meaning shots had been fired. Minneapolis police officers responded to the scene. We arrived and found a woman with a gunshot wound to the head. Life-saving measures were performed at the scene, including CPR. The woman was transported to Hennepin County Medical Center, where she has since been pronounced deceased. The preliminary information that we have indicates that this woman was in her vehicle and was blocking the roadway on Portland Avenue, midway between 33rd Street and 34th Street in the city. At some point, a federal law enforcement officer approached her on foot, and the vehicle began to drive off. At least 2 shots were fired. The vehicle then crashed on the side of the roadway. Minneapolis police officers secured the crime scene and assisted in trying to preserve the evidence that is there. We have since turned over the scene both to the Federal Bureau of Investigation as well as the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which will be conducting an investigation into this use of deadly force. I want to thank the mayor, city council president, other members of the city council, state legislators that were on the scene. This has been a very difficult time for everyone in the city. And this is obviously a very, very tragic situation where a woman has lost her life. That being said, in addition to this tragedy, which unfortunately we did predict, we were seriously concerned about further escalation from the scene. And I want to thank the elected officials that came themselves to help us prevent that from happening, as well as the individuals on that scene that remained peaceful and that abided by law enforcement instructions so that we could preserve that scene and ensure that a full and transparent investigation can take place. That being said, I just echo the mayor's comments that we ask that the community continue to call for peace. We understand people are going to be upset about what happened, and people are going to want to exercise their First Amendment rights. But please do so safely and lawfully to ensure that we do not have any further tragedy in this city or destruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, council members. Commissioner, I'll open it to questions.
Any idea on the identity of the ICE officer who fired the shots at this point?
I don't have that information, no. The question was, is there an identity of the ICE officer that fired? I do not have that.
Here, we're hearing the ICE officer stopped a position from helping the lady who was shot. Is that true? We've seen videos all over social media that someone tried to help this lady, and they were pointing guns at and told to get away. Do you know about that at all?
So the question was, there's information out there that people tried to help the woman that was shot, and ICE officers then pointed guns at them and told them to leave. I do not have that information. I myself saw a video of the shots being fired as the car was driving away. What I can tell you is the narrative that this was just done in self-defense is a garbage narrative. That is not true. It has no truth. And it needs to be stated very clearly, since we have already seen a video of it. I do not know as to what you're talking about.
So, Mayor, she wasn't driving.
Over here.
She wasn't driving the car toward him, using her vehicle as a weapon.
That does not appear to be the case at all.
What's the city's protocol when an observer or an activist calls 911? You say an agent's phone or an agent's pointing a gun at them. How does the city of Minneapolis handle that situation before considering that?
Repeat it one more time. I missed the first part of what you said. And I'll turn it over to the chief. Yeah.
What does the city do when someone calls 911 and a federal agent's
Oh, I see. Yeah.
That sort of thing?
I'll turn it over to the chief. The question is, what does someone do when a federal agent is pointing a gun at them? Chief.
So, if I heard you correctly, the question is about when people call 911, what is the city's protocol in these situations? We've had a very dramatic increase in 911 calls related to this activity. We have a protocol in place that has been evolving as the situation has been changing. And at this time, there is a designated supervisor that is on duty 24/7 that fields those calls. And we do everything that we can to ensure that they are appropriately prioritized, with the priority being placed upon the protection of life and safety of everyone in the community.
Can you tell us any more about the woman who was fatally shot? Was she there as a legal observer, protester, bystander? What do you know that you can share?
So the question was, what can I share about the deceased? There is nothing to indicate that this woman was the target of any law enforcement investigation or activity. This woman was in her car, and it appears then blocking the street because of the presence of federal law enforcement, which is obviously something that has been happening not just in Minneapolis, but around the country. She appears to be a middle-aged white woman.
Chief, just about a month ago, you said these unplanned and questionable tactics by federal agents would result in someone being killed at a press conference right here. Do you consider today's tactics in line with that, or do you just have a generic response to the fact that somebody is now dead?
The question is that I had previously made several statements about being concerned about the tactics being employed. I am obviously very concerned that I have been told that a woman who was sitting in her car blocking the street and not the target of any enforcement activity is now deceased. However, I do not know, to be clear, I do not know the exact circumstances of the shooting, but I would tell you, in any professional law enforcement agency in the country, I think they would tell you it's obviously very concerning whenever there's a shooting into a vehicle of someone who's not armed. But it also is something that is possible. At times, it is justified. But it is very concerning, and it's something that most law enforcement agencies in the country train very intensely to try and minimize the risk that law enforcement officers get placed into a situation that the need for deadly force would be necessary.
Has there been
I didn't hear the question, I'm sorry.
Has there been any indication of the need to shoot into the vehicle?
The question was any indication about the need. I guess getting back to the justification of this, I have not seen any information other than what I have communicated.
Was she alone in the car? Were there children in the car with her?
The question was if she was alone in the car. I know that I got there shortly after this call came in. I did not see anyone else with her while I was on the scene. However, I've since been told by our officers that have been with her the entire time that a spouse has arrived at the hospital.
Mayor, just curious if you're thinking about contacting federal authorities to register your concerns about this, personally making phone calls, et cetera.
Yes, we've been on the phone all morning As soon as we learned about this, again, there were a series of priorities that we needed to go through. The first, of course, is to keep people safe and to help the victim in any way that we could. The second was to get ICE off of the scene. There was the notion that ICE agents would be necessary to create a perimeter around the scene itself. They themselves were creating the kind of dysfunction and chaos that they claimed to be trying to help with. And so the message that we delivered very clearly was to make them leave. Now, beyond leaving the scene, they should also leave our city and our state. You know, we do work, our chief does work, our sheriff does work every single day to keep people safe in our city and in our state. And crime is dramatically down. Crime is down. It continues to trend down. They are doing the hard work of investigating, of arresting perpetrators of violent crime. What this federal administration is doing right now is not about creating safety. Do not let them tell you that what they are doing is about creating safety. It is not. It is having the opposite impact. We need to be clear-eyed about the work that is moving forward, and they need to leave Minneapolis.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Mayor, you may know this with your legal background. If a shooting is found to not be justified, does the city have any legal, or the state rather, have any legal recourse to bring charges against this ICE agent, given that this person is a federal agent, if the feds don't?
So obviously, and I have to always lead with this caveat because it is true, an investigation still does need to be conducted. I had my perception of what took place based on the vehicle and the vehicle's positioning. It does not appear that the individual is trying to ram anybody. Now, the question was, if it is in fact found to be an unjustified shooting, who issues the charge, who prosecutes, how does justice take place? I don't know the answer in full to that. This is obviously information that we're still working out. Chief, do you have any additional information, or Commissioner? Yeah.
The only thing I would add to the mayor's statement is that the crime scene was held by the Minneapolis Police Department, and the investigation is now being led jointly by the Federal Bureau of Investigation as well as the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And the purpose of their involvement would be to investigate whether any state laws within the state of Minnesota have been violated.
One more.
Can I just add something to that too? What's very important is that for our communities that we do have some kind of part in this investigation. It needs to be done on a local level. With all due respect to the federal level, we do need to make sure that our local agencies are involved. Well, certainly the BCA is very well capable of working with our federal partners in doing so. That is something that is needed for our communities, and so that's something that I can tell you that there's already been conversations from the U.S. Attorney's Office to the BCA that have already taken place today. How that's going to roll out, we don't know yet, but we are making sure that there is some kind of local entity, namely the BCA, that has a part in this investigation for the purposes of transparency and expedient transparency as to what happened today.
One more.
Sorry.
If that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Final piece. Yeah. Again, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to the media for being here and disseminating this very important information around this tragic incident. To reiterate a final message to our community members, I understand the anger. Let's unite around hope and love and peace and getting justice. That's what we need to be doing right now. I appreciate the service from everybody up here as well as the 435,000 people that call Minneapolis home. Thank you.
Got some housekeeping.
All right, that was the end of a press conference, a joint press conference with city leaders, Mayor Jacob Frey, Police Chief Brian O'Hara, Hennepin County Sheriff Dewana Witt as well, speaking out on this incident this morning.
Right. What we have learned is a 37-year-old woman was shot by ICE. She had a gunshot wound to the head. We understand that her spouse is now at the hospital there.
Yes.
Nothing to indicate, according to law enforcement, according to the police chief, that she was the target of any law enforcement activity. We have heard from from people on the scene. They believe she was a legal observer there. What we heard from Police Chief O'Hara, because we are getting conflicting reports about what happened prior to the shooting. He says that she was in a car blocking Portland between 34th and 35th because of the presence of ICE agents. They said the law enforcement officer, the ICE agent, approached her on foot and the vehicle began to drive off. 2 shots were fired. Then the car crashed. He says he doesn't know the details of the shooting, but he did give that information out there. This is now all being turned over to the FBI and to the BCA.
And like you said, Heather, I mean, we're hearing a bit of conflicting reports between, you know, what ICE was telling us this morning and now what we're hearing from city officials. And we know that Homeland Department Secretary Kristi Noem spoke out on this just earlier this morning, and we do have some sound from her. Let's take a listen to that.
The act like we saw today of using a vehicle to try to kill an officer and his colleagues and the other people around him is something that every politician, every elected official, everyone in this country should be able to rally around and say that it is wrong. And that sanctuary cities and sanctuary states that protect individuals who do that should no longer be allowed.
Again, that is Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem speaking at a TSA press conference earlier this morning. In a statement from ICE, they had said that the woman who was shot and killed was using her vehicle, weaponizing her vehicle. Now, it is important to point out that Mayor Jacob Frey, in this press conference, he said he had seen video of the shooting, and he called that narrative coming from ICE, coming from the Department of Homeland Security, he called it garbage. He said he actually used words. Yes, he actually used an expletive earlier describing that. You could tell that he was very angry. He said the narrative that this was done in self-defense is a garbage narrative, that is not the truth. And he says it does not appear to be the case at all that she was using her car as a weapon. We have heard that also from people who were on the scene there. We ourselves have obtained some of this video too. Barrett and I haven't seen it quite yet, but we have talked with people who have seen it, including the mayor of Minneapolis, who we just heard from a few minutes ago.
But I do have a message for our community, for our city, and I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the f out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. People are being hurt. Families are being ripped apart. Long-term Minneapolis residents that have contributed so greatly to our city, to our culture, to our economy are being terrorized, and now somebody is dead. That's on you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for watching CBS News 24/7. I'm Lindsay Reiser. One person is dead following a clash between federal agents and protesters in Minneapolis. That is according to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, DHS says ICE was conducting targeted operations in the southern part of the city when several people began blocking agents' cars. The department claims the victim, a 37-year-old woman, was one of the violent rioters who weaponized her vehicle and tried to run over agents. According to the Minneapolis police chief, she was in her vehicle, blocking the roadway. Federal law enforcement approached her on foot. She began to drive off. At least 2 shots were fired, and the vehicle then crashed. The mayor of Minneapolis says that she suffered a gunshot wound to her head and was pronounced dead at the hospital. And he disputes that she used her vehicle as a weapon and said, quote, the narrative that this was done in self-defense is a garbage narrative. He also said, ICE, get the bleep out of Minneapolis. DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs says the ICE agent, fearing for his life, shot and killed the alleged perpetrator. Mayor Frey of Minneapolis says he does not have the identity of the agent at this time and says an investigation will need to be done. When asked whether the state will be able to file any charges, the death comes amid an influx of 2,000 law enforcement members into the Twin Cities metro area. The city's mayor is calling, as I mentioned, for those agents to leave and saying that they are trying to solve a problem they created themselves and causing chaos and distrust.
CBS News correspondent Chanel Call is following this for us. Chanel, there is a plethora of video on social media, of course. We as a news organization are going through that and seeing what we can verify. We don't know exactly which videos Mayor Frey saw, which leads him to say that this was not self-defense. But what can you tell us about the videos you're seeing?
Yeah, there is a lot of video showing up on social media, Lindsay, and some of it is purporting to show the moment that those shots rang out in that South Minneapolis neighborhood. Again, we are working to confirm and to verify that video before we can share it with you. But I do have two new videos that have been verified from our CBS News teams that I can show with you right now that show the aftermath of that shooting. So take a look at this. You can see that there were ICE agents sort of lining the snowy street, and then you see them kind of pulling out this person from the car. They seem to be then performing CPR on this person. Of course, you know, the camera is going back and forth. You can imagine this was quite a chaotic scene. But at the end of these videos, two things are true. You see them carrying this person away on their hands and feet. We also heard from a witness on the scene, Lindsay. I want to play for you part of that interview. Take a listen.
They were not allowing EMS to come with in timely manner. They were DHS and them. They were blocking the roads and not letting EMS come with like time and like the ambulance. They just kept the roads blocked for a very long time to the point the body had to like literally get carried out the way it did.
Now, as for what happened in the moments that led up to this shooting, that's still what we're working to determine and to verify right now. But we did get a couple of different accounts of what happened. So let's start with what DHS is saying unfolded here in Minneapolis today. I'll share my screen with you so you can see this, and I'll read you part of this social media post, Lindsay. It says, ICE officers in Minneapolis were conducting targeted operations when riders began blocking ICE officers, and one of these violent riders weaponized her vehicle, they say, attempting to run over our law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them. It goes on to say that this is characterized by DHS as an act of domestic terrorism. An ICE officer, fearing for his life, the lives of his fellow law enforcement and safety of the public, fired defensive shots. So a couple of key things coming out of here. We know there were multiple shots. That is what DHS is confirming. And then later on in this statement, they also say the alleged perpetrator was hit and is deceased, also adding that the ICE officers who were hurt, they say, are expected to make full recoveries. Now, I was talking to you about how we're getting varied accounts of exactly what happened because we also, just moments ago, Lindsay, heard from the city's mayor, we heard from local law enforcement, and they have a very different account of what happened. In fact, local law enforcement just moments ago said it doesn't appear that the person, quote, rammed anyone. The mayor, Lindsay, even calling the narrative that this was done in self-defense, quote, a garbage narrative.
And also, we're learning a little bit more about the woman. As I mentioned, she's 37. Senator Smith says that she's an American citizen. And we also did learn in that press conference that they say that she was not a target of one of those ICE raids. I'm trying to find the exact quote that they used here.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to determine exactly what she was doing in the country and her nationality, all of that. But I can tell you that her neighbors did come out in the moments following that shooting. Obviously, they were there. They heard those loud bangs, and that is what created those clashes between police and protesters. There was a large group that gathered on this very residential and snowy street. And Lindsay, that's really when the chaos began. And then eventually that is what led to tear gas or those chemical irritants being used by police and law enforcement there to try to disperse people who'd gathered in reaction to that shooting.
All right, Chanel, stay with us in case we need to go back to you. Thank you so much. Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skenga joins us now from Minneapolis. And Nicole, you are in the region. You're based in Washington, D.C., but you're there because you went on a ride along with DHS. You had an exclusive interview with DHS Secretary Noem. What can you tell us from what you've been hearing from witnesses?
Well, we just spoke to a witness who was literally on the street, catty-corner to where this all played out. She had been filming, and she told us that she saw an enormous presence of ICE vehicles. They were unmarked cars. She described what you can see in the video that is circulated of the incident, that red SUV sort of backing up, looking like it might have been parking, agents approaching. And then as she was passing the vehicle, she heard pop, 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 3 distinct pops, and she knew right away that it was gunfire, immediately turned around and saw a crash. And then in the ensuing moments, there were ICE officers who responded and deployed tear gas, is what one eyewitness told us. Another eyewitness told us that they ran out afterwards. They saw law enforcement surrounding the individual in the car, begin to perform CPR, and eventually an ambulance came. At that point, that eyewitness told us it was clear that the individual had died because law enforcement was not rushing around her, so likely pronounced dead at the scene. I will tell you, having embedded with ICE law enforcement yesterday, having covered Homeland Security for a while now, this is an enormous law enforcement deployment that we have seen in the Minneapolis area. More than 2,100 federal agents from ICE and Homeland Security investigations. It's more than New York City. It's more than Los Angeles. That's more than Chicago. And we've also been talking not only with law enforcement, but with residents here in Minneapolis in the area, members of the Somali American community who are disturbed, who are scared, neighbors here on the street telling us they knew this was not an if, but when, that this is their worst nightmare, and that if the Trump administration's intent is to promote public safety, this is doing the exact opposite. Now, we saw DHS put out a statement claiming that ICE officers fired because, in particular, one ICE agent fired because they believed their life was at risk and that they were defending both their own personal safety and the safety of other officers. That statement goes on to include some statistics, an 8,000% increase in threats to ICE personnel under the Trump administration compared to the Biden administration. And it speaks to that ongoing tension. But if you look at the video, and we're still learning new details, a much different scene played out. And we have seen FBI personnel on the scene. They will be taking the lead looking into this officer-involved shooting, as is customary. Behind me, there is protests that are happening. You can see hundreds of people. Earlier, we witnessed and were experiencing tear gas as canisters were deployed by ICE officers. We saw people choking, vomiting on the streets. This neighborhood is described to us by folks who live here as being very calm, very friendly. There's a school nearby. Everyone we've spoken to is just devastated that this is happening in their community.
All right, Nicole, thank you very much. Let's now go to CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, this is really, Minneapolis has become a flashpoint of not only this Operation Metro surge, but also this alleged fraud that has really garnered a ton of views, particularly on the right with social media videos and the like.
That's right, Lindsay. A few things. No immediate comment from the White House about this specific incident and the reaction to it from the mayor and other local officials. The Homeland Security Secretary, Christine, who spoke with Nicole yesterday about these operations, and that is an interview worth replaying or going and watching yourself if you can, folks, just a little while ago was asked about this during a tour of the southern border in Texas, and she said they're continuing to gather more information. But this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. And she said that her department would continue to protect ICE officers in cooperation with other law enforcement. But, of course, there, if you've seen in Minneapolis in the last hour or so, a big call from local authorities, at least, for the federal authorities to step aside and get out. To the broader issues about fraud, alleged fraud in Minnesota, the White House today asked about that during a briefing earlier, and they ticked through a handful of things that they're now doing. But so much of this renewed federal attention on Minneapolis is being driven by the renewed attention on those years of alleged fraud, and now much of it being prosecuted by the Justice Department there in Minnesota. Among other things, the Trump administration has told Minnesota they're going to begin auditing Medicaid recipients in the state. The Labor Department's conducting a targeted review of Minnesota's unemployment program. The Agriculture Department's requiring Minnesota, like many other states, to certify their SNAP recipients. Some of that is tied up in an ongoing legal fight between Democratic-controlled states and the federal government. The Housing and Urban Development Department is focused on investigations in the public housing in Minnesota, and the Small Business Administration has suspended nearly 7,000 borrowers amid suspected fraudulent activity. So you can see that in the response to the attention that these years of fraud got just in the last 3 weeks, much of it driven by conservative influencers in social media space, the Trump administration is now directing so much more federal attention and scrutiny onto what local and state authorities were doing there. And of course, the ICE raid, as Nicole has pointed out on our air, being one of the largest ever deployed into a metropolitan area, is just one big dramatic and now obviously deadly part of that.
And the administration seizing social funds for several states, including Minnesota, that goes to social programs. All right, there's a lot of other stuff happening today, Ed, including the U.S. military seizing an additional 2 oil tankers linked to Venezuela. What can you tell us?
We know that they were seized early this morning. The one that was seized up in the waters towards Iceland was one that the United States had had its eye on for several weeks, the Bella 1. This is that ship that had tried to pin a Russian flag on its side and claim it was part of, or that it was protected by Russia. The United States saw it as a false flag operation, that this was part of a Venezuelan shadow fleet that had been moving sanctioned Venezuelan oil out of that country. It was captured just a little while ago. Our own James Laporta reported that Navy SEALs were the ones that boarded the Bella 1 and took control of that vessel. There was another one, a Cameroonian flag vessel, also seized today in the waters of the Caribbean Sea. It is headed towards the United States now. That was another vessel tied up in sanctioned Venezuelan oil and is headed now towards the United States, according to the White House.
Ed O'Keefe, thanks so much. Still to come, major developments from Los Angeles as Nick Reiner returns to court in connection with the stabbing deaths of his parents, Robert and Michelle Reiner. Up next, we put the U.S. capture of Nicolas Maduro into historical perspective and explore what the past may be able to tell us about the future of U.S. foreign policy. You're watching CBS News 24/7.